Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Halloween horror movie review. Today we continue our journey through the Universal Monsters saga with 1942's The Mummy's Tomb, a very direct sequel to The Mummy's Hand from 2 years prior. Alrighty, let's talk about it today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So, The Mummy's Tomb takes place 30 years after the events of the previous film, The Mummy's Hand. Now, remember how at the end of the review I did for The Mummy's Hand, I made a big point of mentioning the time it takes place in? Yeah, if you need a refresher, The Mummy's Hand took place in May of 1940. So if this is 30 years later, would that make it May of 1970? Yes, so the far-flung future of 1970, though strangely, nothing has changed. And the world is still in the middle of World War II. Like, my God, World War II just went on forever in the world of the Mummy, apparently. Yeah, so I guess it's a case of Universal wanting to have continuity across a series of their monster movies, but not really thinking too much about the logistics of it. It's just like, we'll just set it 30 years later, whatever. It seems like Universal's thinking on this is, it's more about the continuity of the characters than it really making any other kind of sense. You know, like how in Ghost of Frankenstein, for example, they had characters that mysteriously returned to life in the sequel, but Universal's logic was, well, those characters were in the previous one, and because those characters were in the previous one, it establishes continuity with this one. No, it actually contradicts the continuity of the previous one. Whatever Universal from 80 years ago, we'll just roll with it. Okay, fine, it's 30 years later. And remember how in The Mummy's Hand, I was talking about how when Marta looks at the contract, the date of May 12th, 1940 is clear as a bell right there in your face. In this one, there's a whole bunch of instances of newspapers and telegrams just flying into the screen. And I actually paused the Blu-ray just for fun to see if there was any indication and looked for dates, but there's not a single date to be seen on any single one of those. It's like they knew. It's like, we're going to say it's 30 years later, but we're not going to put any actual dates on the screen because that might confuse things continuity-wise. I don't know. I'm just giving myself a headache trying to work out the continuity issues here, so let's just carry on talking about the movie. So it's 30 years later. Steve Banning is sitting in his living room talking to his son, who is all grown up and has his own wife, and regaling them with tales of his archaeological adventures of the past. Marta has since passed away. It's pretty clear that they got married and had kids, and, well, that's his son right there in front of him. And he's telling them stories about back in his archaeological days. I have to say this right off the bat. The movie runs 60 minutes. The whole thing is 60 minutes. They round it up to 61 when you look at running times on the internet, but it's 60 minutes and some odd seconds. Fully the first 15 minutes of the movie is a recap of the previous movie. So literally an entire quarter of the running time of the film is a recap of the previous film. Now that said, it is from the perspective of older, wiser, having seen a lot of stuff throughout his life, Steve Banning relating the tale to his son and so forth. And it's fun to see Dick Foran in old man makeup acting older, when of course only 2 actual years have passed since the previous one. So we got the recap of the previous one, and then, much like at the beginning of The Mummy's Hand, we cut to the high priest of the Order of Karnak talking to one of his disciples. In this case, it's George Zucco returning to the role of Andoheb, who is now, of course, the High Priest. And I have to say, the old man makeup on Andoheb is fantastic. A huge testament to the skill of Jack Pierce. Not only could he do great monster creations, but just the old person makeup that he did for Dick Foran and George Zucco, and later Wallace Ford. Yes, Babe comes back as well. Is just fantastic. And it's interesting to see the different actors and how well they can play the same characters 30 years older. Dick Foran does okay. George Zucco does phenomenally well. He actually plays it very convincingly as a shaky, decrepit old man. When, again, this is only 2 years since they did the previous film, but the story is set 30 years older, so they're playing these characters much, much older. So it kind of echoes the scene from the beginning of The Mummy's Hand, where the previous high priest, the old decrepit man, was talking to Andoheb, played again by George Zucco, how he was filling him in about the Tana leaves and how all of that works. So in this case, it's done much the same way, where Andoheb is telling his disciple, this time played by Turhan Bey, how the Tana leaves work and how their sacred duty is to keep Kharis alive. Now, this time it's slightly different than what we learned in the previous one. It's much the same in that 3 Tana leaves keep him alive, and 9 Tana leaves give him mobility. So, under normal circumstances, they would just make the brew with the 3 Tana leaves just to keep his heart beating every time the full moon is in the sky. For whatever reason, it's taken Andoheb 30 years to come up with this plan. He really wants revenge against Steve Banning and everybody. He's decided that what he's going to do is send his disciple, as well as Kharis, to America. He found where Steve Banning is, and he wants to send them over there to basically kill Banning and his family and everybody associated with the defilement of Ananka's tomb 30 years earlier. So they go to America, and in the process of getting the plan underway, the mummy kills a few other people, and some other people catch sight of him, but aren't killed by him. So there's a bit of a mystery going on where the police are trying to figure out who killed this person, and they're investigating this, like, well, there was some strange dust around the neck that we can't quite identify, and it turns out the dust is actually mold from the mummy's wrappings because he's so old. And they find a piece of the fabric that he snags on a bush, and they analyze that, and it's like, well, this fabric is thousands of years old. So Steve Banning begins to suspect what's going on. It's beginning to sound very much like what happened 30 years ago. But of course, while his son and everyone knows the story of what happened, and for the most part seems to believe it, he's having trouble convincing the authorities of what's going on. Well, I won't spoil how it all turns out, but needless to say, there's a lot of revenging going on throughout this that pretty much clears away the old cast and introduces us to a new cast to carry on where they left off. But it's a lot of fun seeing how it plays out. And one thing that I find becomes a recurring theme is the plan of the bad guy would have played out perfectly if he didn't let his own desires get in the way. So in the midst of sending Kharis out to kill everybody, Mehmet Bey, the character that Turhan Bey plays, decides that he wants Isabel Evans, Frank Banning's, fiancée. Frank is Steve's son. He wants Isabel for himself. So he sends Kharis out to kidnap Isabel, and he's going to bring her back and give her and himself the Tana leaves mixture so they'll be able to live forever together. I mean, he's clearly delusional. He's just lost it for some reason. But this is a theme that we'll see a few more times over the course of the Mummy series, where it's like, everything's going according to plan. The plan will work. Revenge will be had. Vengeance will be met. But it's the lustfulness of the disciples of the Order of Karnak that get in the way and mess everything up. I guess they just got to pick better disciples. I don't know what to tell you. Like, Mehmet just doesn't seem to really think things through very logically. There's a scene where he's being confronted by the police, and there's people all around him, and he decides in his infinite wisdom to pull a gun on the cop in front of him. Like, you're surrounded by cops. What are you doing? So, I don't know. So this time around, as the Mummy, we of course have Lon Chaney Jr., and he would play the Mummy throughout the remaining sequels. Now, one interesting bit of continuity that I really like that they did, that connects it to the end of the first one, is in the first one, he's set on fire. So he's just engulfed in flames, just goes up like a pile of matchsticks because, well, he's covered in old wrappings. So in this one, it makes reference to that, the fact that he was burned in the previous one, but it didn't destroy him, it only damaged him. And you can see that in the makeup by Jack Pierce. Like, there's one eye is, like, seared shut now, and there's, like, visible damage on the Mummy's face and body, and his right arm, which was kind of useless in the first one, is also useless in this one. Unless he's carrying a beautiful maiden, of course. It seems like whenever the Mummy has to carry a beautiful maiden, suddenly he has full use of both arms. But most of the time he just kind of walks around with one arm like this and then swings the other one. But there's lots of fun moments in this one, and I like that it connects to the previous one, and we kind of get to see these characters from the previous one again. I love seeing Wallace Ford back as Babe, and I think his performance as 30 years older Babe is comparable to George Zucco's performance as 30 years older Andoheb. Very convincing. Like, you really get the feeling that he's lived his life over the past 30 years, and he's not as happy-go-lucky as he was in The Mummy's Hand, which I think makes perfect sense, because that was a really traumatic experience for everybody involved, and it's really weighed heavily on him, and I think everyone else involved who survived. Steve Banning seems to have kind of made his peace with it, and it's just a story he tells about his past adventures now. But you get the impression that Babe was really deeply affected by it. He's not his usual jovial self when we meet him, but he's clearly the same man, but someone who has been through a very traumatic experience. And I love that Wallace Ford played it like that, which I think was a really believable continuation of that character. And I really liked his performance in this a lot. So Lon Chaney as the Mummy is a delight as always. He does get a few little moments, like for example when Mehmet Bey says, I know I've been sending you out on missions of death. This time is a mission of life. I want to take a bride. I want you to get this woman. And Kharis just kind of recoils, like he's shocked and maybe even a little irritated by the idea. Because, I mean, he has his eternal life through the use of the Tana leaves, but he no longer has his lady love, Ananka. Ananka is dead, and he was never able to recover her. So, in a way, you got to think about it like Kharis is really living a tormented existence. You have this order of priests that are just keeping him alive, but the whole reason he wanted eternal life in the first place is gone to him. Ananka is dead, and has been dead for thousands of years. And the Order of Karnak has just been keeping him alive all this time. Why? Why? I mean, out of honor and respect for the tomb of Ananka, I guess, and that's something, but Kharis has got to be just the most tormented soul imaginable. I mean, the whole reason he went to steal the Tana leaves in the first place was so that he and Ananka could live together for eternity. Eternal life. Together. Forever. And that's something he can never have. So in a way, when you kind of break it down, the story of Kharis is quite the tragedy. So now he's essentially this automaton being used by the Order of Karnak to protect the Temple of Ananka. It's like, well, thank you very much, but can I just die, please? I don't know. I'd be kind of ticked off if I was Kharis, but I guess he's beholden to them. He can't break from their control. So he's just kind of stuck doing their bidding. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out in the next couple of movies. Maybe Kharis gets his moment. Maybe he fights back. Maybe not. We'll find out. Well, that is it for The Mummy's Tomb. Definitely an entertaining sequel and one that I enjoy returning to. I enjoy the whole Kharis saga, actually. Despite its continuity gaffes, I actually think it's a really fun continuing story. And while it does have its little problems here and there, overall it's quite an entertaining series, and I like it a lot. I've rewatched it a few times. So, as always, if you'd like to add this Blu-ray set to your collection, you'll find Amazon links in the description below, both to the Mummy Legacy collection and to the full 30-film Universal Monsters collection as well. Thank you very much for your support, as always. Really appreciate you guys using my Amazon links. Yeah, so I'll see you next time. So thank you very much for watching. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. And be sure to catch me on Twitch. I stream just about every day. So until next time, sayonara.